Welcome, George, to my podcast. Like I was mentioning a little bit before we started recording, I haven't had a podcast in about a year or so, or a little over a year. So
Mhm.
I was focusing, like I said, I've been living in New York and really studying at a yeshiva, which is a place of learning Torah.
Yeah.
Returning to this podcast for a while, having been in touch with you through a mutual friend and being in touch here and there, and also receiving your at home with George. So I've thank God had your number for quite some time, and I'm really excited to finally be on a call with you, a video chat, because in my own experience, playing college ball in Dallas.
hmm
And after experiencing some injuries, and I remember getting introduced to meditation and mindfulness, and that was like the first time
hmm
I discovered a tool that helped with the mental aspect of the game.
hmm
And I don't exactly remember how I came across your book, The Mindful Athlete. I think, to be honest, I was in just a Barnes and Noble one day,
hmm
and I came across the book because I was looking into like sports performance.
hmm
And not only like I first of all, I just really appreciate the book. I know you also have the relatively new book, Unlocked, but your book I really credit as one of the first that led me really not just the path of mental performance, but even inward exploration and
hmm
kind of discovering my soul and learning how to become aware of emotional reactions and triggers. And that itself eventually led to me re-exploring and becoming in touch with my soul as a Jewish individual to then
hmm
explore and want to become religious, or I don't really like that term, but Orthodox. However, we like to use the label. But so thank you for all of that. I really appreciate and also just the correlation. Like I find a lot of my life as in the practices we have as an Orthodox Jew similar to, or at least what helps me is when I uh, compare it to when I'm playing basketball. Because basketball is still such a amazing part of my life. I still thank
hmm
God I'm able to play at a competitive level. But for those not familiar, a lot of my listeners do happen to be Jewish, and of course not Jewish. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and how you got to, what a lot of people know what you're well known for is training the greatest in the sport of basketball, working along Phil Jackson, training Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm sure by now many other great names.
So, so, um, so I got into this process similar to yourself. It was recommended to me when I was in college, and I ended up getting injured in college, and my basketball career was over before it even started. I played in high school, but in college I would have been a walk-on in my sophomore year, and that year I was rooming with Dr. J, Julius Irving at UMass. And I like to say some people would talk about being has-beens. I was it never was. So I use humor a lot, right? But but what happened was, so when I got injured, I really didn't know who I was because I let my basketball talk for me. I was
Yeah.
quiet and shy, and so I struggled for a number of years, but I got injured, I got chronic pain and I got addicted to pain meds and alcohol and stuff like that. But I was a functioning substance abuser, so I got through. And then in 1984, on April Fool's Day, a friend of mine came by and took me to an AA meeting, and then everything changed after that because through AA I found uh, a higher power, God, Hashem is what you would call it, even though there's no such name that captures everything.
Mm.
But um, so I got clean, and in part of the process, I learned about the mind-body connection and mind-body modalities like yoga and Tai Chi, but also about meditation and this idea of developing a spiritual practice, a way of really getting through the illusion of things and really getting an alignment with the divine.
Mm.
And I read over a book a week. So I believe I just came up on 41 and a half years of sobriety.
Mazel tov.
And over that time, I've read over a book a week for over that 41 and a half years.
Wow.
And so I study all the religions, uh, especially Hasidic tradition, the Jewish
Oh
tradition.
yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
There's a lot of correlations
Yes,
with your recent book. You know that?
yeah, of course it is. Well, that's it. I mean, truth be told, I grew up Southern Baptist, but my grandmother, she was a domestic and she raised Jewish doctors and lawyers, and my older brother spoke Yiddish. So,
Wow.
so the
Which
and of course, I have a nephew who's a Rebbe in Lakewood, New Jersey. Edie's sister's son, Avi.
you said your grandmother?
And my grandmother used
Uh,
to be a domestic for and and the people she worked for were lawyers and doctors, Jewish.
but she herself, you said she was just working with.
She was a domestic. She, like she raised the kids. When you're a domestic, and you go
Okay, I'm
into
not
the
familiar
house.
with that term.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So not only, she go in and clean the house, but she raised the kids.
Ah,
You understand? So, she cooked for them, and, that's just the way, just like you would see different programs like Leave It to Beaver or Donna Reach or whatever, and you would see somebody, they'd have somebody, I think Hazel was a woman, was a program about Hazel, and she was like the person that did all the cooking and did a lot of the other stuff. But anyway,
yeah.
my point is, I study a lot of spiritual practices, and so yeah, so that's what it did for me is help me to connect with the power source, or
Hmm.
whatever your concept of God is. And 12 step helped me to understand that I can create my own concept of what that is. And as a matter of fact, when I had a conversation with Avi. He's the Rebbe now, but he was a young man, very Orthodox, and he said to me, "What was my concept of God?" And I said to him, "I said, Avi, you see that little socket over there in the wall?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I just plug into the power source," and he got it. And so that evaded the whole discussion, because if I would have gone any other way, it would have been very interesting. So, but it was more about just talking about it in a way that made sense. And so I got into recovery and I started learning about prayer and meditation
Hmm.
and uh, and study. Studying spiritual practices, but I study everything, quantum physics, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
anything that helps me understand myself and understand the world that I'm living in and how to live in the world in a way. And it's interesting because Martin Buber's book, The Way of Man, has been it's been very influential to me because he talks about this idea of as human beings, we could do something that angels can't do. And you know what that is, Solomon? That means we can let God in wherever we are. We can make something holy just by hallowing it.
Yeah.
And whether you're davening and praying 5 times a day or whatever it is, uh, just giving thanks and reminding ourselves that it's a life is a precious gift, and that all of us have a divine spark. And this is what I loved about the way of man. It talks about we have a shell that's encrusted, and people, we have a system of hideouts to prevent us from accessing that divine spark and sharing it with the rest of us.
Hmm.
So that kind of describes the work that I'm interested in doing.
I love that. I'm curious to hear a little bit. It might. I don't think it'll take us too off, but you said you came across and learned a little bit of Hasidus. That's so like I'm a part of the Chabad Hasidus movement.
Yep.
So what have you come across? What have you learned?
I learned well, in the way of man, it tells me a lot about it. It's about so myself, I would be somebody who has turned.
Who
You
has?
know, that idea of turning. I've tasted of the fruit and I've said no to it.
Ah, I see. I see.
So, but I learned what I learned about it is, it really is about a way of being that allows us to let the divine in wherever we are.
Yeah.
And that I have a system of hideouts. For me, it was drugs and alcohol and other ways, but there's other ways we can hide from ourselves. And so he starts off the way man, and he talks about this idea that the Adam is in the garden, and God asked Adam, Adam, wherefore art thou? And he wasn't really asking him where he was physically. He was really asking him, I've allotted 32 and a half years to your life, and that's where I was when I got recovered. And what have you done with it? So it's very existential. It's very this idea of living up to your potential, or allowing the divine spark to shine, and giving other people the permission to do the same. And so there's something about that divine spark and having a system of hideouts, and that the most challenging thing we could do is embrace our greatness.
Yeah. Wow.
So just to say that, and then now when I think about it and there are a lot of existentialists that come from the Jewish tradition and whatever, but when I think of Viktor Frankl and
Yeah.
Martin Buber, and this idea of not being able to embrace our greatness and to hide out from it, to actually run from it, because it's so challenging. But this particular person I'm thinking about is Soren Kierkegaard. And
Hmm.
in 1846, he talked about the idea that one side of the coin is anxiety and the other side is freedom, and that they come together. And so in the existential philosophy, they talk about the dizziness of freedom. And this idea of, one side of the coin, Soren Kierkegaard said, was freedom, the other side was anxiety, uncertainty, and that he actually called something like embracing our greatness the alarming possibility of being able. The alarming possibility of being able is that then when I work with elite athletes, but everybody, anxiety is always here because
Yeah.
we're always, each moment is unknown and unfolding uh, in real time. And our job is, how do we relate to it in a way where we can stay in align with the divine, how we can still relate to it in a way and still, bring that holiness, bring in that sense of being connected to something greater than yourself into it.
Wow.
So I know you didn't expect me to talk like this, but
Hey,
this is how I got
what can
how
I
I
say?
got here.
I've learned not to come with any expectations or judgments.
Yeah, but it's all about connecting to the divine, man. It's all about
Yeah.
understanding myself and then sharing it with everyone else. And I'm not talking about ego. I'm talking about my every one of us has a uniqueness that never was, never will be.
Yeah.
And our job is to embrace that and share it with the rest of the world for the highest good,
Yeah.
or
Wow.
greatest good, however you want to look at it. So my trip down a rabbit hole of substance abuse and whatnot, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me,
Mhm.
because there's no atheist in the foxhole.
There's no atheist in the foxhole.
First thing you say is, "Oh God, help me."
Is that so? AI, you got connected with John Kabat-Zinn, correct?
Yes, yes. So I knew
I
John.
think he's also Jewish, no?
Yeah, he is Jewish. As all of my teachers are Jewish. That's why we call them Boo Jews. That's what they call. We don't call them that, but that's what they call. But all my teachers are all Jewish.
So,
My
so
early
how
class.
how did you get and that's what led you eventually to working with the basketball?
So. So what happened? So I grew up, obviously I went with Dr. J, so I was around the game and I played basketball. But what happened was I was working as a financial analyst. I was a functioning substance abuser, so I would work as a financial analyst for 16 years at corporations. And when I got clean, I continued to work, but I went to graduate school and learned about psychology
Hmm.
and philosophy and just other things, because I was really interested in trying to understand how I was able to get clean and so many other people were not able to.
Hmm.
And I was very interested in motivation and what motivates people, but also how to work with people who are not in alignment, who will say one thing and do something else. Because I work with substance abusers like I was, and so I just wanted to understand, seek to understand how myself, but others as well.
Hmm.
And so I started once I got when I got clean, I had chronic pain and migraine headaches, as well as the stress of trying to stay clean and live life without substances.
Yeah.
And so I started studying at this place called Cambridge Insight Meditation Center. And one of my teachers, Larry Rosenberg, who not only is he Jewish, but he's from a long line of rabbis. Him and his father broke that lineage, but going back 6 generations, they were all rabbis. Um, so I started working with him, and when I quit my job and spent 2 years just trying to figure out. I lived in a meditation center for 6 years.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and part of that time I didn't work. 2 years I didn't work. I just had the luxury of studying myself and doing long retreats and focusing on prayer, meditation, and improving conscious contact with my higher power, whatever,
It
with
makes me
God.
feel better about what I've been doing.
Yeah, I mean,
Basically the same thing, but in a
yeah.
Jewish learning
And,
center.
and so when I stopped working, John was very cl close friends with Larry, and Larry said, "Hey, I want you to go hang out with John and think about because you got to figure out now you're not a financial analyst and you want to incorporate what you're learning into your new vocation. Why don't you go and hang out with John?" So I went and I did their internship, and then I ended up I went on a long retreat and I came home and I was still living at meditation center and the correction Department of Corrections were looking for somebody to come in and teach inmates meditation and yoga and they were and helping them with recovery. So I was an ideal candidate. So I started working with them a little bit and then we actually wrote a grant. John helped me write a grant, and then I collaborated with the Center for Mindfulness or the Stress Reduction Clinic at the time, and we had a program we had an inner city program, and then we also had a prison program where we go in and not only teach the inmates but the correction officers, even the commissioner, and so that's how I met John and started learning about mindfulness-based stress reduction and being able to offer the teachings in ways that society could access without having to use the poly terms or any just break it down so people can understand it as simply a way of developing oneself.
Hmm. Wow. I'm curious, since we're in a line with the subject, a lot of Judaism, especially Hasidic Judaism, we talk about meditation and prayer. There's a individual part of that, but there's also the collective aspect. Let's say that when we have, we pray 3 times a day among a congregation, a minyan.
Hmm.
And I even kind of alluded to it this morning. Something I've really been kind of grappling with is in the morning, I'll feel almost like this pressure, similar to maybe I had, growing up and with sports in high school and college with basketball, but wasn't aware of it. This like anxiousness that I got to get there on time,
Hmm.
you know? And so, because I also have a meditation practice in the morning, and then we have the ritual bath, the mikvah we talk about, and then of course learning Hasidus, the works from the Lubavitcher Rebbeim, and then you have formal prayers. But sometimes, and being in the environment of a yeshiva, similar to, I'm sure in some ways, when you're in the what I forgot the name, like the yoga area, or not yoga, but meditation village.
Meditation center
Yeah,
or
center. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
I should know the terms. I also went on meditation retreats. And anyhow, what I'm getting at is there is, and Hasidus even talks about this, that we have a body and we have to work with our body, but there's also this aspect of getting to this thing that's like the collective is kind of outside of you, right? But it's there to help you with your personal connection. So a lot of the time, this thing that I've been experiencing, grappling, and even though I have awareness with it and trying to tune in and be curious with it, it seems very strong because of the like repetition of, I would set an alarm and get up at this time and learn for this amount of time and do everything for this time. And so you can start. But now what I've been exploring with and playing with is having that on paper. At this time, I do this and this, but also being able to give the body more rest
Hmm.
and sometimes not using an alarm and just to put myself more in that state of flow where I don't know what time I'm going to wake up. I don't know how much time it's going to take me to do this, but I know I'm mindfully moving from one thing to the next. But somehow, sometimes how that shows up practically is I may not show up at the morning prayers when the congregation exactly starts, and I may miss a certain uh, parts of it that, let's say, all based on how it's was taught from some rabbis, based on how it was how it is in the book. You need to be there on time, and you have to hear this and that. So I'm curious. And with this approach, it's actually been more with ease, more with the state of flow, and actually more focused on which is what I originally thought when I was getting into, these practices of prayer and putting on the tefillin. I'm sure you're familiar with all the terms.
Hmm.
But when I got into the system, in a sense, going to learning about it and being among that, it started to feel like that rigidity came.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit about how would you, because in a lot of ways, an Orthodox lifestyle like what I'm describing can be like a high performance,
Oh, no question.
athlete.
No
So
question.
and one of the ideas like from your book Unlocked that I picked up and already seeing some connection with Hasidus is you talk about like unlocking versus forcing. There's this
Yes.
concept in Hasidus called bittul, which means in a poor translation self-nullification, but really it's like self-transcendence. And when you let go of yourself, as I'm sure you're familiar, and you told I think even Kobe might have heard
Kobe.
once or
It's
Michael.
Kobe. It's
They like
Kobe.
when you like stop trying to like just play, right?
Yes, it's like the best way to score is not to try to score.
Yeah.
The challenge for all of us is to use the rules, but not to be ruled by the rules.
Ah,
So it's just like if you teach poetry or you're doing something, you got to start from a center, but then it becomes a moving center. My Tai Chi my teacher taught me this. She called it there's movement and stillness and movement. And so when you're doing Tai Chi, even though you're moving, you still have a moving center. And so this idea of being doing the rules but not being ruled by the rules is understanding that there's a internal there's an internal rhythm inside each of us that we have to listen to. And sometimes we have to be in a group rhythm to get it going. But then once we get it going, then our own personal rhythm or pace that's
yeah.
only for us has to be followed by us.
Mm.
And so this idea, I'll give you an example, because you can get mechanical and get just do things, but not really be there. And so me being a recovering perfectionist, I used to, when we did meditation retreats, you sit, walk. And I used to sit in the hall and never miss anything. And then Larry said to me at some point, I don't want you to go in the hall. I want you to go sit by yourself and go do your own thing. Because, and so there's this balance of understanding. And so what I hear you saying is there's a knowing, and this is what's really fascinating about all this. When you can, we talk about be still and know, but when you get access to that quiet place inside of you, we call it the still small voice sometimes, or the eye of the hurricane. You can call it whatever you want. But when you have access to that, and this happens in athletics, when you get
There
a
actually there
flow,
sorry to interrupt. There actually is it's called the Col de Mamadaka,
okay.
the small voice.
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
So there's a so what I know in my experiences is when I can get an access to that place within that space, that quiet place, the eye of the hurricane or whatever it is, there's a knowing and a creativity that goes beyond human research. Like they say, there's a certain level of peace that goes beyond our understanding. Well, that goes for a lot of different things. But
Mm,
I know that when I can come from that place, there's a knowing and a creativity that's beyond what we could ever imagine. And so part of the idea of be still and know, and sometimes my Georgism is be still until you know, or be still to know.
nice.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you start seeing, so ultimately, so in the Buddhist tradition, when you prepare before you meditate, and I think in the Jewish as well, you set your intention, whatever. Sometimes it's helpful to read something or
Yeah.
whatever. But this idea for years of taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So what does that mean? That means taking refuge in the fact that I have Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, a divine spark, and that there's teachings, there's the scripture, that is the Dhamma, the teachings that allow you to do that, they get access to that divine spark. But then there's the community, so you can take refuge in the community. So one of the things I'm fascinated about in the way of man, Martin Buber talks about one chapter is to begin with yourself, but not to be preoccupied with yourself.
Mm,
So everything begins with the self, with you. You meet God in your temple or whatever, Hashem, wherever, in your temple of your body, and your job is to access it. But what makes it challenging is that we want one size fits all, or we have the assembly line thing. And the reality is each person has to work it out for themselves. And so if you have a Rebbe or spiritual advisor, whatever, they can help you. But in my mind, I'm not saying what they should do, but what I do is my job is to keep pointing people back. This is what Larry would say to me. He kept pointing back to me and for me to figure out how I needed to do it. Now, they can give me some concepts and some principles and some structure, but at the end of the day, I got to create my own structure and follow my own path. Is this clear? What I'm saying
yeah,
is
yeah,
this,
yeah.
and so this is what makes it so challenging because one size doesn't fit all. One size doesn't fit all, but you begin with yourself, but you don't be preoccupied or in with yourself. It's always about self and other. But if you're not in alignment, and he talks about it, and it's like, oh, my unity of thoughts and actions. It's like integrity. It's like if I say I'm going to do something, then I have to do it. It's one thing people say to know and not to act is not to know. So you say, yeah, I got that. I understand that. But if you're not doing it, you don't really understand it. And sometimes, like me, I had to behave my way in the recovery because if I thought about it, it kept getting me high and drunk. But if I just behaved my way, then the understanding would catch up. And so that's why some of these principles, whether you want to call them, uh, you know, um, precepts in the Jewish tradition or commandments or whatever, these things are guides and they help us align. But how we manifest them has to come out of our own being, out of our own conditioning, and that's what makes it so challenging. So this idea of taking refuge in the fact that I have Buddha nature, a divine spark, and the concept of the acidic, what I learned from Martin Buber, that divine spark is encrusted in shells, and I have a system of hideouts. And my spiritual practice is to allow myself to break out of that. It's like Michelangelo. It's like I'm chipping away to let that
Yeah.
masterpiece express itself, and it expresses itself here where one stands. Now, these are some of the titles from the book of The Way of Man. Here's where you stand. So we have this idea, well, if I go over there and I dig up the treasure behind under this bridge, that's where the treasure is. But here where I stand is really saying, no, it's not over there. It's right where your feet are. It's here where one stands. It's like you take a stand and then the treasure is right here, right now.
Mm.
And so you work for that. So instead of looking out there and trying to do things, you realize that you are where you are, and how you relate to it. Can you make it holy? Can you hallow it? Can you bring the spirit, the light into that situation and transform it? And my what's his name? Viktor Frankl, one of my other great teachers that didn't know he was my teacher. He talks about self-transcendence. And he talks about this idea of, having gone through those concentration camps, and saying man is search for meaning. And he talks about you can find meaning by creatively by creating a work of art or doing a good deed, or you can find meaning through love by encountering someone or experiencing something. And then the third way he says you can make meaning is taking a stand towards unavoidable suffering. So whether you're being tortured, and the Buddha talked about this, he said that if somebody's sawing off your arms or your legs and you get angry, you're no student of mine. It's like no matter what happens to you, you get to choose the attitude and the energy, the holiness that you can bring to it. Now that sounds really crazy, but that's the ultimate freedom, is that between the space between stimulus and response, you get to choose your attitude and your being. So you don't let anything, even torture, take you out of who you are or your divineness, that your holiness, your that divine spark. So these are really challenging teachings, but that's my experience, and I talk about going through my chronic pain, like 40 years ago or whatever. And back in August, I got shingles, and it got into my trigeminal nerve. So they even discolored my face. So it got to the point where I was like, if you watch Batman, they have the Two-Face. One side of my body, trigeminal nerve, which affects the teeth and
Yeah.
all of this. So I couldn't touch that. I was in pain for like 8 or 9 weeks.
Dang.
And and what helped me was this idea of not being able to relate to the pain, and I had to use pain meds, but to see it as an option. So I chose to be present for it. I chose to bring love to it, to seek to understand it. And it's one thing, and it's fascinating because I was teaching while I was in pain. I was talking to people about being in pain and the immediacy of experience, not what I did yesterday or whatever. Yeah, this is what I'm dealing with. My eyes, you could see it. I could be in pain, but there was a way of being of service. It was a way of relating to it in a way where, and this is what Viktor Frankl was talking about, is when we find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering.
Hmm.
When we find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering. It doesn't mean it's not painful, but it means we're relating to the pain as a object of awareness, not as who we are.
How do we I hope I didn't interrupt, but like sometimes you can give meaning to something and it's in a sense allowing it to be there longer.
It's all about letting go and letting be. That's what it is. And if you talk about you form the intention, then you allow it to happen. We're trying to make it happen instead of trusting that if we just are still, there's a knowing when we should move, when we should do that. And in sports, you can see it. I talk to whether I'm working with a goalie in soccer or ice hockey or whatever, or center fielder or somebody out in the field. There's something about when you are in that silence, out of that silence, the body starts moving where the ball's going to be or where the puck's going to be or
Yeah.
where the football, the soccer ball is going to be. There's something about when we can get into that. There's a knowing. It's almost uh, like we meet what we mirror. So even though we think that we don't impact people, we do impact people. We know that because there's a thing called neurons that we all have, neurons that we have, where somebody, if somebody gets peaceful or somebody gets happy, then that vibrates with other people.
It's one thing to know it intellectual, but how do you bring it
Your
into
experience.
the experience? Because let's say like everything that I was sharing with you and you were mirroring back, I can experience it, but morning comes, it's like wake up and there's that
Anxiety,
tension. Huh?
tension,
That
whatever it
tension.
is. Yes, yes.
Um, yeah. So sometimes what has helped for me a lot, for example, is the less is more approach.
So what do you mean by that?
Let's say like I used to have a rigid concept of like, oh, I have to meditate for this amount of time,
Yes, yes, yes,
or I have to learn for this amount of time. Well, yeah.
yes, yes. So it's we have habits, and sometimes the habits take over from the immediacy of what you really need. And that's the thing because we have a way of being where things are being we have habits that happen without our permission. Until now when we start to be conscious about what we're doing, about what our intentions are, or going by how we feel rather than what we should be doing is kind of an interesting thing because for me I'm kinesthetic. So to get a sense or feel like, okay, I don't feel like doing this, or like when I talked about Larry took me out of the rhythm of just doing the same thing everybody else is doing and just breaking it, changing it. Sometimes what I would do in my training is instead of driving home the same way, I drive home a different way because I wanted to reprogram myself. But the anxiety is always there. As long as you have freedom, you have anxiety. And the two sides of the coin. And what do you mean by that? Because when we're free to just do whatever without having a preconceived idea, that anxiety could be excitement if you bring a certain sense of curiosity or
Yeah.
wonder, because our job is, and it's a flow trigger to be in novelty. Our job is, especially in the meditation practice, is to see things in new and fresh ways. So how do you do the same thing over and over, but seeing it in new and fresh ways and keeping it fresh, keeping it new, bringing that sense of wonder, that excitement? Because wisdom begins in wonder. I got that quote from someplace, and I believe that's to be true. When you're a little child and when you're young and childlike, they fall down and they get up, but they don't give up, and they're in this sense of, oh man, I'm moving, I'm doing this. So there's something we can learn from them is bringing that quality of curiosity, interest, excitement, willing to be surprised,
Mm.
that sort of thing. And so when we go through and we say, I got to do all of this, and what that's saying is, yeah, I got to do that, but that's taking me away from what I really want to do. And so, how do you train the heart so you can follow it? One of the Tibetan monks said that, I think it was Ajahn Sumedho. He says, the trick is not to follow the heart. The trick is to follow the heart so you can train it. So it's coming out of wisdom. It's coming out of compassion. So
Mm.
you can train it instead of just training it without having the precepts, without it being guided and in alignment with the divine, in alignment with what you know, what your basic principles are, this idea of non-harming. So in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about the three poisons or the greed, hatred, and delusion. So the greed is, the essential desire, but it's also just being selfish, just wanting to do things. Then the ill will and the hatred is it's like aversion, but it's also like it's just really like damaging. And then the delusion is just not knowing. It's like confusion or not having a clear idea of what is wholesome, what is right. And so a, a lot of the practice is really about this idea of cultivating a wholesome state of mind, cultivating using wholesome thoughts. And so if Gandhi said our beliefs become our thoughts become our words become my actions, our actions become my habits, our habits become our values become my destiny. And the idea is all starts with this, all starts with the right view or with having in the right mindset. So when you have love in your mind, when you have compassion, when you have goodwill in your mind, now your thoughts are going to reflect that. Your words are going to reflect that. Your attitude is going to reflect that. And that's when you have unity of thought and action, is when we say, okay, how can I be kind? How can I be of service? And then that intention can actually determine how you're seeing things, what you do. But you have to get rid of the noise and the clutter. You have to have your mind at ease or at rest, your heart at rest. So there's a willingness, there's a space, there's a love, there's uh, a growth mindset, but it's also coming from plenty, not coming from lack, coming from abundance. There's something about that. They call it the broaden and build theory. When the mind is at positive, its ability to and tolerate discomfort, its ability to see clearly, to have an expansive view rather than having a narrow view and coming from lack and saying I have to do this rather than something else. And so it's this idea of training ourselves when you have that tension or whatever. And Viktor Frankl says this. Usually, the tension is from here's where I am and this is where I'm going. And tension is not to be uh, denied or removed, but do what you're doing in the tension. The detention is actually what allows our latent abilities to express themselves. And so that's a different take. Instead of trying to get rid of the discomfort, embracing the discomfort and realizing that, we had this thing, the steps in the sand, you got two steps of footprints, and then there's only one. And you say, okay, God left me. No, you're being carried. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
What was the last thing you said? Let me or
Uh, uh,
lead me, but you said, but I'm being carried.
Yeah, so you're saying like the metaphor is there's two sets of footprints in the stand, and then there's only one. And
Uh-huh.
so thinking is if you're in the fear mode, you're saying, okay, God left me, or
Uh,
whatever your concept is, and the reality is no, you're being carried. So whatever when you come from prosperity, there's this guy Charles Fillmore talks about prosperity or supply. It's like when you get rid of the negative emotions like fear, doubt, and insecurity and all of that, and you're in the love, you're in the gratitude, you're in the idea of wanting to serve, then you're in abundance and everything you need to succeed, you succeed. So it could be the story about Jesus fed everybody with a couple of fish and this or that. It's kind of a metaphor of when you are not in lack, you are in abundance, and when you're in love, there's a willingness to let go of yourself or get beyond your self-interest. And because you let go, not only do you grow, but you there's more. There's more. It's kind of like, and I know from there's a guy that wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. I think his name is Bruce Lipton.
Bruce Lipton.
And he said on a cellular level, the cell is either in survival mode or growth mode.
Yeah.
So that's it. And so the idea is if we can be in growth mode, we can be open to reality and allowing things to happen. So instead of feeling the urge to go do this, even though you don't feel like it, or something is telling you, I need this, to be able to trust that and to go with that, even though everybody might be telling you that, okay, you're slacking off or you're
Yeah.
not.
So a lot of people might, a lot of us might have that valid question. Like if a person doesn't use alarm in the morning and they just have that flexibility, they might show up at various times and not always be on time for whatever they need to get to.
Yeah, so for me, I very rarely recently I get tired for a lot of reasons, but for a long time, I I used an alarm clock, but usually woke up before the alarm went off. You understand what I'm saying? And then sometimes I need the alarm and I might not feel it or whatever, but it's something about when you there's something about intention when you are clear about something, there's something about where you don't it just happens. It's almost like there's an alignment where it's like being carried by the being in flow, being in the zone. And we know that this flow triggers. One flow trigger is novelty. Another flow trigger is complexity. Another flow trigger might be um, they talk about being, curiosity, passion, and purpose, being on time, being on purpose. There's a lot of different flow triggers, but it's this idea of forming an intention and allowing it to manifest,
Hmm.
which is what I think you're talking about. And what I talked about with Kobe is like the best way to score is not to try to score, because by trying to score, your
Right.
ego or you're being driven by fear or doubt or a desire, and you're not seeing things clearly because those things clutter things. And the idea of just being open and being willing to just allow things to happen, then there's a knowing that you find it flow, or you know the right thing to do. It just happens. It's like it's
Yeah.
effortless. And that is the challenge, isn't it? Is to be able to wait, to be able to be patient and trust that when it happens, you'll know when to move.
Yeah.
You'll know when to do certain things. And you've had those experiences.
Mm.
And to the degree that you start understanding how you did it, you can replicate it.
Yeah. No, I always felt like that's why I quit. Like basketball, I felt like was my gateway to Hashem. Because when I would get in those moments, that I was always a shooter, so the hoop looked like a hula hoop. I would just
That's
throw
right.
the I would just
That's
throw
right.
the ball up, and then afterwards I'd be like, how the heck did I do that? You know?
Yes, yes. That is because, well, I write about it in my book, The Mind for Athlete, when Cain is shooting the arrow and he closes his eyes and hits the target, and the guy says, "Well, I'm not believing that. That doesn't make any sense." But he says it's not done. It happens.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of it happens. And in the game of tennis, he talks about self one and self two. And self one is the conscious self, but then there's the unconscious self that just you got to get out of the way and just let it express yourself. So you train yourself and you do all of the preparation, but then when it comes time for the competition, there has to be an ability to see clearly. So you have a clear goal, immediate feedback, and then there's a mechanism where you're making adjustments without trying to. It's just really clear what they are. And so when we can have the mind in that relaxed receptivity, that happens more often. That happens quite a bit because there's nothing pushing you or pulling you. So you're not pushing things away, you're not pulling things towards you. You're just allowing things to speak to you in its own language. And in the speaking, there's a knowing, oh, this is the time.
Yeah.
This is when you make the move. And when you play sports, because you have a beginning, middle, and end, and you have a well-defined outcome,
Hmm.
that moment to moment, you're getting feedback. And if you can adapt the feedback in the moment as it's happening, and then you get a sense for how it's going to happen, and then you just find a flow, find a rhythm, then it's almost like if you're driving down, Fifth Avenue, and you catch every red, green light. It's like you're just going and you just caught the
Yeah.
wave. You caught that rhythm. You found the flow of life. I
Yeah.
would
So two things. It reminds me actually that so in Hasidus, we have for the founder of the Hasidus, the Baal Shem Tov. You might have heard the name.
yep,
He
I
so,
definitely have.
yeah, so see he has beautiful teachings, one of which you heard of halacha? How like we have Jewish laws,
Okay.
but halacha also comes from the word halicha, which means like the direction or the ways. But he
Yeah.
had the teaching that it's actually an acronym, the Hebrew letters, for it's Hariyu Lashem Kol Haaretz, that sing to me the whole world praises to God. Meaning to say, and he teaches that when a person is really living with the halacha, he is aligned with this, like you're saying, he is part of this divine symphony, divine orchestration.
Yes. Yes. So it's like Neville Goddard talks about it in some way too, and it's interesting because he was trained by this black Jew. I think his name was Abdullah, and he was teaching them all about the Jewish tradition and about numerology and all of that stuff. And it's interesting because he says that and you pray and you act as if your prayer is already answered. So there's a famous Sermon on the Mount given by Jesus, and he uses the acronym ASK. And what he's basically saying is, asking it shall be given to you, seeking ye shall find, knocking it shall be open unto you. So it's just this amount of faith where you you are forming an intention and you expect the intention to be met. So you become the prayer. You become it just
Mm.
by allowing it, but not by coming from fear and being in that tight, lack thing, like, oh, I don't know if it's going, I got to do something, make it happen, versus coming from this idea of it's this
What you,
idea that it's already exists. What
I'm
you
it.
want exists, and
You
how do
are
you,
it. Yeah.
yeah, how do you, and from a quantum physics point of view, how do you have the collapse of the wave function? So that you have all these visions, then it comes into it happens. It just, you bring it in. So your attitude and your consciousness has everything to do with that. And so when you trust that and you are in line with the divine, everything is fine and right on time. That's my choicism around that. And it's hard to talk about it because it's not everything, but you can feel it when you're just going with things, you're allowing things to happen,
Yeah.
but you have an impact on it because when we look at something, it changes. The
Yeah.
observer and the observer are interacting. So when you pray and you expect whatever you ask is, you know, will be given. Whatever you seek, you shall find. Whenever you knock, it will be open unto you. When you believe that and you live that, and you're living a righteous life, which means you're not doing harm, you're just being as loving and compassionate and present as you can. There's something that allows that path, that flow, that rhythm to manifest through you.
Mm. How do you guide your athletes, or how would you guide, you know, just everyday individuals to being able to tell if that tension or that pull is from the body resisting change, like it's in its habitual ways, or it's actually guidance from your, like in Hasidic terms, your godly soul.
Yes. So,
Let's say you have a player, right? You have a
yeah,
player in the
yeah,
game,
yeah.
or in my
You
case,
can.
it's, huh?
It depends. That's why you got to know yourself. You got to know. My tendency is to be intense, to bring more energy in like
Same,
this, like
yeah.
a warrior energy, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I got to dial it back. But then there's some of us that are too passive, and we
Yeah.
get that's where right effort comes in, and you bring it forward, and you can usually tell by how your body is and how because when you have tension and when you're tight. You're probably trying too hard. With me, I would do that. I try so hard meditating, I give myself a headache. So I know that I got to dial it back. Okay, just got to dial it back. So as much as I may want to put an intensity of 5. I got to go with 1 or 2. And so it's like you like stringing a right effort. We talk about it's like when you play a string instrument, whether it's a violin or a guitar. The string has to be just right. It can't be too taut and too loose. And so where you learn how to determine whether you are trying too hard or you're allowing things to happen. And so it's a great question, and all of us are different, but I feel like the body doesn't lie. It will tell you. It will tell you when you're too tight or when you're too loose. And then you just kind of find that balance where it just is. But a lot of it has to do with coming out of the silence, coming out of the stillness. There's so much power in the silence and the stillness of just being still, just allowing things to happen, not waiting for them. But I say be be um be relaxed but alert. You're just like a cat, a cat
Yeah.
stretches and does everything. And doing as soon as it sees something, it just jumps right in. But there's no tension there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
There's no tension. It's just
No,
a,
so that's what I'm trying to get at, because let's say with you know, one could make time, and that used to be like me as well. Like, what do you mean? If I want to meditate a certain amount of time, I'm gonna w put an alarm at this time in the morning and to get a certain amount of time and everything. But that didn't ultimately help. It was more actually when it was like quick moment. You couldn't do everything. You gotta like make it short. But what was interesting about that is, like you were mentioning, when you really want to get into the stillness, whether it's a meditation, prayer, you can't be thinking about things you got to get to. But in a sense, that kind of helped me when, let's say, I used to have this rigid mindset, like, oh, I have to meditate for 30 to 60 minutes. But then I was like, that's starting to become like, and also I would, with all the learning and everything, with the prayers, I'm like, this is starting to get a little rigid. and I would do 10 minutes, you know? But but I would have it in mind like, oh, I got this to get to, but that actually kind of helped.
What do you mean? How does it help?
I guess I don't doesn't waste time.
So what if you change the see, there's all kinds of stuff out there, but how
Yeah.
you perform is how things occur to you. So to me, I used to do a lot of retreats. I lived in a meditation center. I did a 90-day silent retreat, different 10 days, 12 days, 15 days, whatever. And what I discovered, there's a couple of philosophers that taught me about meditation, and the philosophers are Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. I got my mind on money, money on my time, money on my mind. That's meditation. So to meditate means to contemplate, and to contemplate means to look at repeatedly or closely. And so the idea is we have this ability to meditate from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep. So the formal practice of prayer and meditation and having time, and then there's the quality of mind that you are bringing meditative throughout your day. You
Yeah.
are asking yourself and just being clear, well, what am I thinking about? And so the prayers, and it's interesting because I got relatives who are Jewish and Muslim, and they have some of the similar things. They pray a lot of times during the day. There's, they don't eat pork and beef, pork and ham. They don't eat that stuff. So it's very fascinating. And I've been at a funerals where it's the same thing. The guys up front, the women in the back. It's like it's like it's this thing of realizing that every moment you have the ability to be present for your life. And but if you do it like this, rather than gradually building up to it, where you just ask yourself a question like, "What's my mind doing? Do I have on the love glasses or the fear glasses? Am I reacting or am I responding?" So a lot of times, and it was interesting. I had this conversation with a friend of mine, and she said, "I noticed that you're focusing on what could go wrong." I said, "Oh, you're right." But we get hung up in this stuff, and sometimes having friends and good friends that could tell you like a blind spot in one of those, and those new fancy cars. It's like you don't have to believe that just because you can't see the car doesn't mean it's not there, but you have a warning system that tells you there's something there, even though you can't see it, and I have to
Yeah.
believe that. And so, being in community, being with others, there's people that know us that can allow us to say, "Hey, you're a little bit over here. You need to go over there." But we can do that ourselves with our self-regulation. Just really understanding when we say the wrong thing and do something, if we listen, it doesn't feel right. Something is not quite right. And so learning how to tune into that and embrace it without judging, that's the challenging part, is that because we have the secret self, if you want to know who you really are, you got to be able to observe your reactions to life uncritically. And your reactions are going to tell you, even though you might not believe it, okay, that was unkind. So I was probably coming out of the fear. I was probably coming out of lack, and that I wasn't seeing things clearly, or I was apprehensive. Like, okay, I'm supposed to go to meetings, or I'm supposed to meditate. Okay, so sometimes you got to go with the flow, and it's like, okay, so I don't have time, but I'm going to take 10 minutes, 5 minutes, then it becomes 15 minutes, whatever. But the idea is, whatever time you have, you take that, but then you ask yourself questions like, uh, where am I going? And then as you're walking from one room, like say I'm in the living room and I'm going to go to the kitchen, can I be present for that space in between those two locations? So a lot of time we're walking and we're doing things and we don't even know what we've gone by. That's part of life that is unlived, unexamined. And so this idea of just being in the body, just noticing and just allow ourselves to just be there, slow down, even though we don't have time, that's when we have to take time. When we start looking at just you can have a clear view of is my mind is it calm or is it not calm? Is it
Yeah.
concentrated? Is it not concentrated? These are all contemplations and the foundations of mindfulness. So the idea is clear comprehension is you don't forget your meditation object during the day. So you can pray that I will not mind, or you can just say, be loving or be present or to bring joy where there's no joy, bring love where there's hatred, bring harmony where there's disharmony. There's all of these different prayers and these little nuggets, we call them, in 12 step we have, live and let live. How important is it? Oh, slogans. We can have these little mental cues to
Yeah.
change, self-regulate, so we get back in the moment, we get back into love, we get back into I and the other one, and we can see that, but to do that without judging any of it, because we're not going to be saints. They're going to be things that we say we're embarrassed that we even say them or think them,
Yeah.
because there's no shame there. It's like, whoa, where'd that come from? But if we can create the space that just knows it, it's just a thought, and it's coming because our mindset is in fear, it's in lack, it's in wanting love, wanting compassion, wanting acceptance. And if we can see that, then we can just use that and say, oh, I need to get really intimate when fear arises. I got to get intimate when anxiety arises. I got to get intimate when I have this ill will, whatever you want to call it. Or I got to get intimate when I feel love, or there's an openness.
When something's very deep, like I'm sure you're familiar and you even mentioned, we have a divine spark, and Chassidus mentioned you have lots of klipa, which is called shells around
Yes,
surrounding
that's
it.
it. That's my
Sometimes,
Uber. Yeah.
but
Yes.
sometimes somebody has, depending on what the, let's say, trauma is, it can be very deep. That it
Yes.
happens, let's say, like the limbic brain, what it's like 3 times faster than or 30 times faster than your conscious brain. So it's like sometimes some of this stuff happens so fast.
Yeah, you get emotionally hijacked, and it
Yeah,
goes right from there's no space between stimulus and response. It goes right from the stimulus goes right to the amygdala, and the
yeah,
amygdala, or what we call the reptilian brain, it has four options. It's going to fight, flee, freeze, or fawn.
yeah,
You see a lot of people bending the knee. That's what that's about. Okay, you avoid the pressure. You just become a doormat, or you just bow down, or because you don't think it's worth it or whatever. But we could use the fight, the energy of the fight, to actually channel that energy to doing the right thing, or saying no, or not reacting the way we would normally, not letting the impulse control us. And so that, but we're going to catch ourselves um, doing the thing that's not helpful. But if we could understand what is the mind doing, or what are the beliefs that are operating that's allowing us to do what we did, and that's what we have this ability to self-regulate, to actually, true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. So reflect on, okay, what was I feeling? What was I seeing? And you start to see there's a pattern between whether you're in survival mode or growth mode. It's not personal. It's a autonomic nervous system thing. You said the limbic, because when I'm in survival mode, I'm looking for danger. So 9 out of 10 thoughts are going to be negative. So if I can get out of survival mode, then I'm going to be looking for opportunity, not just for danger. But if I know I'm looking for, I'm in survival mode, and I'm seeing, like, oh, you're focused on what could go wrong. Oh, I'm in survival mode. Okay, I need to break off. Time out. Take a breath. How do I reset, reboot, renew? This thing gets jammed. What do we do? Turn it off, turn it back on. We
yeah.
can step back, begin again. Boom. That's it. That's a lot of life, is reset, reboot, renew. Just say, okay, what's the next play? What's important now to win? And just focus on that. And then we just getting a little modicum of control, it expands the space. And then now you got space where you actually slow down your experience. And you can tell people when you play basketball, you can tell it when you slow the game down, man, it's a totally different thing. If
Yeah.
you get sped up, it's a totally different thing. I watch these teams and I watch them get sped up, and they don't even know they're sped up.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to have somebody on the team that say, okay, chill. But you say, "Well, I don't have time to be chill." No, you gotta chill. You gotta, and
Put
just
the
slow
use
it
peace.
down. And you use your breath, your body. You have to take box breathing or whatever. Maybe it's an image you have, or maybe it's just like, okay, boom. then you go to the next thing. But the sport basketball gives us a context, a beginning, middle, and end. Life is a marathon. There's no beginning, middle, and end. We have to create those chunks where we can set and then reset and then do the next thing, then the next thing, but chunk it down so we're getting immediate feedback. And the immediate feedback we can reflect on, am I going towards my goal? Am I being who I say I am, or am I being somebody else? And this is the challenge. Now, there's different ways of doing it, but that is the task. The task is, can I be say yes to whatever comes up, and at the same time create the space the, so that I can have the freedom and power to choose in alignment with my core values, with my goal, which is in the non-harming for the highest good, whatever it is. And that's the challenge we have is how do we slow it down? And sometimes we have to pre-program ourselves by saying, okay, when I get here, this is what happens. What do I need to learn and practice so that I can have more space? I can learn and practice. So I'm being myself. I feel like I'm being more loving. I'm being more passionate. I'm being kind. And sometimes we get triggered and then there's no space. We go right to the amygdala and we get emotionally hijacked.
Yeah.
Happens a lot. And so when we do that, if we could just say that now, and this is where the forgiveness and when you know better, you do better. We have to be able to reflect on it and say, okay, I didn't like that, but don't make yourself wrong. Just realize that you got to understand how do you self-regulate? How do you relate to your thoughts, feelings, behaviors in ways that allow you to be yourself, to be present, to come out of the space because you meet what you mirror. So if you see hatred or frustration or whatever, maybe it has something to do with how you're seeing things. And that you're actually creating an alignment or attractive field to pull that towards you.
Mm, love it. Wow, it's so great.
So did we answer your question about feeling whatever you're feeling? I'd be curious to investigate on a bare sensation. What does that feel like in your body? See, because when you can get it to the body and the bare sensation, the bare awareness of it, you're not in the story about it. And what you'll
But
discover.
for me, it's something that's kind of been there for a good chunk of time. So it's about finding more areas, embracing more flexibility, and that's what lets go of it. It's like losing the unhealthy attachment even to those healthy things.
Well, that's the suffering. That's the first law, the first noble truth. We suffer, and we usually suffer because we get attached to things, the way
These
things
aren't
are, the
even
way they
real. These aren't
are.
even things. These are
Doesn't matter. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's a concept. It's something that you're feeling like you want it to either stay here or you want to get rid of it.
yeah,
And even we went through this. I did a six
yeah,
week study group on mindful athlete course on getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And what I discovered was I'm not comfortable being uncomfortable. Because
anyhow,
there's a part of us that says, "Oh, the shoe's gonna fit, man," and you get attached to the feeling good, and you know you're attached to it, and you know you're going to suffer because it's going to change.
yeah,
And then you start to see it, and then and once you see it and realize it, then you can just feel it, just let it be there, and then begin again. Okay, then this is focus on the next thing. Okay, just do the next thing, and then you can reflect on that later. But right now, it's the immediacy of experience. You have to meet the next folding unknown moment as it is, and the best chance you have is to come out of that silence, that stillness, with this idea of just saying yes to it, embracing it. Victor Frankl has a one of his books, his it's called Saying Yes to Life.
got it. Thank you, George. What
Yeah,
would you
so
so how would you say let's for kind of wrapping up someone whether they're an athlete or an everyday athlete like my own personal stuff or stuff I'm sharing with you today. Where does somebody begin? How do they begin unlocking and embracing their unique flow? And also just to add in a little bit of Chassidus, maybe you've learned or not, But we often talk about, especially in Chabad Hasid, getting to these messianic times, which the Baal Shem Tov, I believe is from him. He says, when everybody embraces and reveals their own inner spark of the Messiah, then collectively we will all usher in and embrace that time period where everybody will know God, like God.
That's what we call mirror neurons, brother. So it only takes one person, one leavening, it just our ability to so maybe I'll tell this story. So this guy, his name was he's passed away. His name is Bo Lozoff, and he wrote a book called We're All Doing Time. He used to go into prisons and work. And so one time he had this bright idea that they were, I guess I don't know if they were close to each other or whatever, but he decided to do a meditation retreat, bringing female and male inmates into the same space.
Mm,
And so it was total bedlam, because in the women's prison there's no guys, and in the guys' prison there's no women. Now you have them all there, and they've been locked up for who knows well, hormones all over the place, and it was bedlam. And you know what he did? He sat down in the middle of everybody and just meditated,
mm,
and that energy, and everybody just turned and looked at him.
mm.
Be the eye of the hurricane. And then that people will see that because we're drawn to that. We seek that. We want that peace.
Yeah,
We want that stillness. We want it, even though for some of us it's uncomfortable because we don't know what it is. Because that's the biggest challenge is embracing our greatness, saying yes to it. That's why when I talk about being unlocked, how do you unlock? You got to embrace your greatness, find the flow, discover success. But embracing the greatness. You say, "Oh yeah, I would love that." Yeah, in theory, but when you really look at it, that allowing possibility of being able is in your face. That anxiety, that uncertainty comes with it. And our ability to, like Franco said, not to get rid of the tension, but to be able to embrace the tension and to be with it, to be comfortable being uncomfortable,
to ride it.
to ride it. There's right out, and then there's ways you can do it. I talk about it in my books, and then all you got to do is read the scriptures or read whatever it is. You read it, and there will be something in it that tells you how to manage that tension. But if you think you got to get rid of the tension, you're creating tension
Mm,
by trying to get rid of it. But the worst way to not have tension is just allow things to be there and you to just rest with it and be with it and be still and know, or be still till you know, or be still so you can know.
mm.
But
Thank
this
you, George.
comes
Thank
out.
you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah. So I hope I didn't give you too much, but
No, it's wonderful. Very meaningful to me, and I really I cherish this conversation and getting to speak with you. And God willing, I'll get to meet you in person sometime soon.
yes. And where are you physically?
Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Come on, man. I used to teach in Brooklyn, man. I used to go there, hang out. So yeah, I gotta make a trip to New York so we can meet one of these days.
Sounds good. I would love that.